You know what would make you a faster, a better, a more efficient developer? If one, you stopped using Windows and just shifted to some Linux or Unix like systems. And two, if you started using the CLI a lot more than you actually do right now. Be honest with yourselves about the last point. But why would anyone actually sack their booming gaming career, on Windows and shift to something that is very dull, black, has a green cursor that only nerds use? Why would anyone do that? Well, there are actually two major reasons why anyone would do that and why you should do that as well. The first one being that whenever you build applications and then actually deploy those applications, you won't be deploying them on your system. You won't be sending your local host links to your friends. You'll actually be deploying them on some cloud, such as AWS EC2 machine. And the reasons for this are that you probably don't have a static IP address, which means you cannot keep your site up reliably on the same IP address. You probably cannot also keep your laptop up and running for 24/7, 365 days, because that's very difficult to do. You can't do that reliably. And there are other reasons such as performance, scalability, security, and etc. etc. A lot of reasons why you would choose EC2 or other cloud providers to host your applications. Now, the operating system that you will use on such a machine is almost always going to be Linux. It's not going to be Windows. It's not going to be Mac OS. It's not going to be anything else. The reason for this is that Linux systems are by default very less resource intensive. That is, they don't require a lot of resources to run, which means that the cost of running such a rented machine on the cloud would be very, very less if you're running a Linux system compared to the Windows counterpart. Now comes the fun part. To deploy the applications or to even debug the applications on this rented machine, you need a way to get inside the rented machine. And the way that you do that inside Linux is by remote login, which is done by SSH, which is done by the SSH protocol. That is Secure Shell Protocol. Now, by default, the way to SSH into your machine on Linux and a Unix-like system like Mac OS are by default present on your system, so you don't need to worry about anything. But on the other hand, they're very complicated to do in Windows. I mean, it's a little more difficult to do in Windows. Plus, when you do remote login into your Linux system on the EC2 instance, for example, on the cloud, then you won't be presented with any GUI. You will have to interact with the terminal, and it will be a Linux terminal, which means that you'll have to anyways get comfortable with the Linux terminal, so you won't have any GUI to play around with. Plus, when you're trying to edit code inside the Linux system, you won't be able to do it inside a GUI based editor. That is, you won't be able to do it inside Visual Studio Code or JetBrains IDE or any other IDE for that matter. Rather, you will be presented with a Vim editor. That is a default editor present inside the Linux system. So it really helps to get comfortable with the CLI and the Vim editor. Now, the second point is very basic. The time taken to travel from your keyboard to your mouse to edit any code or copy or paste any code is much, much greater than simply spamming shortcuts on your keyboard and then just performing those tasks using your keyboard. So I'm telling you, your speed of development will go up drastically if you give up the mouse and develop your applications simply using your keyboard. Now, I've been using the Mac, that is a Unix-like system, as my primary development machine for the past 2 years. And before that, I used to use a Windows plus Ubuntu dual booted system back in my college. So I've been part of this train for quite some time now, but I've been cheating. Even though I have been part of the Mac OS and the Ubuntu system for a really long time, I really didn't use Vim a lot for my editing. I always relied on my mouse and my keyboard together. I always relied on fancy IDEs such as JetBrains IDE, like the WebStorm IDE or Visual Studio Code for my editing. Always. But then I was mind blown by meeting a few people in a hackathon recently where they were using Vim and they were not even using their mouse. And without using their mouse, they were able to code so damn fast just by spamming shortcuts on their keyboard and getting done whatever task that they wanted to do. So even though I was part of the OS, I wasn't part of the whole ecosystem. I didn't take the more difficult step. So just stop using the mouse for performing stupid actions such as copy pasting or deleting code. I personally want to use more of the keyboard whenever I'm developing and almost give up on the mouse. And the only way to do that is, in my opinion, by using something known as Vim macros. And that is why today I'm taking the pledge, which you can join me in as well, that I'm going to shift my IDE to NeoVim completely, 100%. That's what my plan is. But then that change would be too drastic in my opinion, and that would just hamper my development, like the current development that I'm doing. So it will be done in steps. The first step is to install a Vim plugin into your IDE. This will help us in getting comfortable with the Vim macros. So once I feel comfortable with the Vim macros, that is when I'll install NeoVim and start developing on it. Similarly, you can get started with NeoVim once you get comfortable with the Vim macros on your current IDE. Almost every IDE out there has a Vim plugin which can help you get comfortable with the Vim macros. So all in all, shift to Linux or a Unix-like system and start using the terminal for everything. F the mouse. Just F the mouse and only use the keyboard. That's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one.